and we said, okay, we got into this. We got two units this year. Wasn't as scary as we thought it would be, and so we made the goal to attack what Brandon Turner on Bigger Pockets calls the stack.
Welcome. This is the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping others through real estate investing. Our hosts interview guests from all aspects of real estate investing who generously share valuable experiences and advice. Whether you're starting out or an experienced investor, this is the show for you.
Hello, and how's it going? My name is Travis Shelton, and welcome to the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we interview guests who want to help others investing in real estate. We keep these podcasts short to about 15 minutes and jam-packed full of content and value for you, the listener. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce my guest today, Vince Mathis, a husband, father of two, and a full-time data analytics manager and real estate investor, working towards financial independence through cash flowing real estate. Vince, welcome.
Hey, Travis, how's it going?
It's going great, man. Really appreciate you spending your time today with us and giving back to the audience. Maybe we can start with. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, super happy to be here. Excited for what you're doing with Hot REI, and excited for this new step in everything you're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. You've kind of seen some of my journey so far, and I'm excited to share, with our audience some of your journey. So can you tell our audience maybe a little bit more about yourself, your background, and why real estate?
Sure thing, Travis. So it really started back in 2017. My family and I were living in Houston, Texas, and I was laid off by my employer and took a little bit of time both locally and ended up having to move here to Phoenix to take a job. And throughout all that time, about 6 months, I also was digging into financial independence, both through podcasts, audiobooks, and part of that was obviously real estate, and certainly digging into Bigger Pockets being one of the biggest ones out there. And so as we were getting set here in Phoenix, I was still kind of looking at things and had to clean up some of my own, financial situation. But once that was established, started attending some of the Phoenix REI meetups that you were hosting. And kind of one thing led to another, picked up a duplex, picked up a fourplex, and then just this last month was able to buy a 15-unit apartment building. And so it's been quite the journey, and certainly look forward to going into details on how all that fell out.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, and I'm just, as I mentioned before the show, I'm so excited to share your story with our audience, and I think it's just, you're someone that I think so many people can relate to, and like myself, I think podcasts and Audible and being able to listen to some of this education in real estate really, I think, change a lot of our lives. And, every show we like to start off with motivation, and I don't know what would be more motivating than hearing your story, but I know you brought a motivational quote for us, so I'll let you share that with our audience.
Yeah, so during that, financial education and journey, Bigger Pockets was certainly one of the biggest influences. And on episode 276 of just the traditional Bigger Pockets podcast, they had Bryce Stewart. And he was kind of telling his story and kind of had a story similar to mine, where he reached financial independence by the age of 35. And one of the biggest things that he brought up was that you need to vacuum the truck. And at face value, that just seems like an obscure quote. Yeah. But he really went into, at the time, they were in a situation where he had to get rid of this truck that he still owed the bank on, so it had a note. He didn't want to trade it in because then you lose a whole bunch of your equity on it. And he had never done that before. But he said, well, I don't know how to sell a truck with a note on it, but I know how to clean it up. So he vacuumed the truck. And then once it was all clean, he said, well, I don't know how to sell this truck with a note on it, but I know how to list it on Craigslist, and that doesn't even cost anything. So he took that next step, and the next step, and the next step. And within a month or two, got the vehicle sold. And looking back is like, I don't know why I was afraid of that. And I think that just applies a lot to real estate. It can seem very daunting. If you would have told me 2.5 years ago that I would own an apartment building, I would think that was insanity. But honestly, buying this last one, the 15-unit apartment building, was less scary than the first duplex. And so as you go, there's always people and tools available for that next step. and it's just taking the next one, and eventually it just happens. You just get there.
I absolutely love that. I'm a big believer in that. Get 1% better a day, or take one step forward every single day. And I think your story and that story that you shared is just that. You got to get started. And so many of us, analysis paralysis, and you're sitting there running numbers or underwriting deals until you're blue in the face, but never making an offer, or never actually learning anything, or you're just staying on the sidelines. So I really love that. So I'm pumped to get kind of into the meat and potatoes of today's show and talk about Vince, how can you help our audience of real estate investors? Tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you want to give back to the people listening in today.
Yeah, I think kind of to take out the lead is that you just got to start. You're never going to know everything. Talking about your analysis by paralysis. So like you mentioned in the intro there, I am an analytics manager by occupation. I have spreadsheets on spreadsheets, both for my personal life as well as certainly for work. I can run the data and analytics and just beat it to death, but eventually you got to jump in. Certainly, you want to know your numbers, you want to know, and we can get into some of those metrics that I look at. But at the end of the day, you got to start. It's going to be scary, but you have to just do the next right thing. To, I think, quote Frozen. My daughter would be proud. But and so as I had moved to Phoenix and had started attending the Phoenix REI meetups, I had attended starting in 2019, and I think going into February of 2020, actually February 18th of 2020, I looked it up. I was attending probably the 5th or 6th REI meetup there in Scottsdale, and had driven about 45 minutes from where I live in Phoenix to get there. And after about 5 minutes in, I just felt uncomfortable. And I have to throw out that this was not on your organization, on any of the people there. This was, I had been to 5 of these by then and said, oh yeah, I'm looking to get into this. I'm going to do this. And the same people every meeting were doing new deals, bringing down syndications or turning over, multi-million-dollar homes in Scottsdale or something. And they always had a new project, a new story, and I'm just the guy that's, oh yeah, I'll do something, and I just had this imposter syndrome, or felt like a poser. That so after only being there 5 or 10 minutes, had some munchies or something, and just went right back to my car and drove home. And I said, I'm not going to come back until I have something to share, something that I have done or can give back. And I do want to say, I don't know that was necessarily the right action to remove myself from a supportive crowd, but it's where I was at the time, and it's what I needed to motivate myself. And so really dug into it, and within about 6 months, had my first deal.
That's awesome. And I think so many of us have that imposter syndrome, right? We always know someone a step ahead of us or maybe a step behind us, but we never give ourselves enough credit. And I think so share with our audience, where'd you get started? So we talked about a little bit about the 15, but you started before that. So once you left the meetup and you decided 6 months later, you got your first deal. What was that first deal, and what was that like? How did you come across that?
Yeah, so I think before even getting to the first deal, it was just that mindset, right? Like, this needs to happen. I need to make this a priority. I need to make this a job. And I had an excellent full-time job, but I need to make this as if it were my profession. And so I went to the full extent of getting these shirts made, getting the logo designed. I've got hats. I've got business cards. I own the URL mathisfamilyproperties.co because it's cheaper than .com. And all of that combined, I think up front was about $150, and then the URL owning that is like $10-15 a month. So very, very little costs, but that has benefited me so many times where I come into a situation, whether it's at closing, whether I'm visiting my properties once they were acquired, that I look like a much bigger organization than I am. If you are just a guy who shows up with a T-shirt, you're a landlord, but you show up professionally, to an extent, and you look like, they don't know if you own a duplex or if you own 300 units or if you're a manager of thousands of units. And so that image has really benefited me in a few ways. But after securing all that, honestly, it was just MLS, and I was also starting to build that network. We live about 1,200 miles from Sioux Falls, where I ended up buying, and I was interested in Sioux Falls versus Phoenix because of the numbers. Again, being a data analyst, I had run ratios of rent to price, and locally they weren't quite there. If I could have gone back to 2009, 2010, that'd have been awesome. But that's not where I was in my journey. And so being familiar with the Sioux Falls market, growing up in that area, still having family in that area, and visiting a few times a year, that's where I wanted to focus. And so I used the network of Bigger Pockets online to say, hey, what investors are there in the Sioux Falls area? What managers and realtors are in the area that are favorable to long distance landlords, and was able to find one. So I'd been working with James Katz with Keller Williams there in Sioux Falls, and he's been excellent. So as a long distance investor, he would go visit properties I was interested in, record the entire walkthrough on YouTube, load it up to YouTube online, and then I could see it. And he would, having already had a few dozen units of his own, he knew kind of the things to look for in these homes, what to look for in the basement, where to look for foundation issues, what to look for, and what potential renters would be interested in, or what might need to get a little work put into it to be able to get more rent out of it. And so he was awesome. And kind of at the end of the day, we closed in September of 2020, just 5-6 months after walking out of the meetup, on a duplex there in Sioux Falls.
That's awesome. And what I hear is you networked, right? You utilized free resources like Bigger Pockets to be able to find an agent, and not just find an agent, but an agent investor that kind of knew probably some of your mindset because he already owned properties. And I always tell people that, if you're going to utilize an agent or somebody, a property manager, I think it's always best when those people do it themselves, right? They invest themselves, or they have properties themselves. They just have a little bit more of a mindset, or they're just like-minded like us as investors, as opposed to maybe somebody that's never owned a property or owned a rental investment. They might not be looking for the same sorts of things. They might not be able to provide you as much of, or be as much of a resource as someone that does invest themselves. So that's really awesome. So from that duplex, what were kind of the next steps after the duplex?
Yeah, so after acquiring the duplex, and it was acquired fully rented. It actually was a family where a mother and the youngest son lived on one side, and her adult daughter and her husband and their kid lived on the other side, which made it helpful because it was a 110-year-old property and needed a little love. It hadn't really been, hadn't had any updates in about 40, 50 years. And so the bathrooms especially had all kinds of water leakage issues. The tub surround wasn't done properly. The flooring was ancient. Windows were not great. And so because they were family and they were comfortable with it, I was able to renovate one bathroom at a time, and they were able to use the full bath on the other side because they were each a 2-bed, 1-bath. And so that wouldn't have worked if those tenants weren't related, obviously. That would have been very awkward for unrelated families.
A little awkward.
But they were able to make it work. And then as they started phasing out, the mom went and bought her own home. I was able to increase the rent quite a bit and move in a new tenant to that side. And then eventually the other side of the family left. I was able to finish some upgrades on that side. But I think... So after we had acquired that, going into that winter, my wife and I started doing what we've now done 3 years in a row as an annual goal setting retreat. And we said, okay, we got into this. We got two units this year. Wasn't as scary as we thought it would be. And so we made the goal to attack what Brandon Turner on Bigger Pockets calls the stack method. And so we had acquired 2, so the goal for the next one was 4. And then the goal for the next one would be 8, 16, and you just keep doubling. And it sounds scary, but you only have to worry about that next one, the next step, right? And then obviously there's lots of little steps in between. But we'd acquired 2, So for the next year, the goal was 4. When I had closed on the duplex, I was wearing this shirt, the hat, all branded out, had the business cards made. And so that family that sold it to me, I had a few other properties. And I said, hey, when you guys are looking to divest anything else, because they were getting a little bit older, didn't want to have to manage it. They were self-managing everything. When you're going to get out of this, let me know. And, I tried to make it super easy for them. And if it doesn't work, you can still maybe list it, but let me know. I'll try and make things easy for you. And it's okay, cool. And so early 2021, about 5-6 months after closing, I get a call from the seller, and they said, hey, I hope everything's going well at the duplex. And we've also got this 4-plex we're looking to get rid of. And I wasn't quite in the position where I was ready to start looking. I was still kind of building up capital again. But I said, okay, what are the numbers? I'll take a look at it and see what I can do, right? Never say no. And they said it's a 4-plex in a much better area of town than where I had bought the duplex. Very desirable, much closer to the shopping centers and all that. With 4 garages, all 2-bed, 1-bath, all fully rented. And she said what the gross rent was, and said they were looking to get $250 for it. And I knew just from those numbers that it was worth every bit of that and more. Having not even seen the place, it could have been practically half burned down, and it would have been worth that. And so I said, I think I can make that work. And she had called on a Friday. I said, let me call you back Monday if that's okay, and I'll confirm and have my realtor walk the property if that works. She said, oh yeah, that's fine. And called up my realtor, James, and said, hey, this is the address. Do you think you could go take a look at it? And do these numbers sound good? And he's like, before he even walked it, he said, if you don't take it, I will. He was very familiar with the area. He actually lived just a few blocks away. And so we were able to get that under contract for $250. And because I was still getting traditional financing for that, it appraised for $400. And so that was a solid one.
In an amazing time at the market, right? In a seller's market, in a time where real estate was going like this, you got a deal about $150,000 discounted because of a relationship you made, because you looked professional when you closed the deal, and you asked the question. So many people don't ask that question. Do you have any more units? When you offload, keep me in mind, right? Something so simple, and you probably didn't even think much about it. And then all of a sudden you got that phone call, and like you said, you weren't even ready. We all find a way when there's a really good deal, right? It's like you find the deal and the money will find it, and you'll find the money for it. Man, I love that. So maybe before we jump into the next steps.
Thank you for listening to the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast. Check out our website, hotrei.com, for additional content and resources. And please take a moment to subscribe and leave a review so we can continue to bring even more value to others through real estate investing.